Hi everyone, my name is Sydney. I'm a dietitian with the Canadian Sport Institute of Ontario, and I'm going to take you through the second module called Fueling and Digestion. So in this second module, we're going to start off by reviewing our balanced meals. And we would have talked about this in our first module, so this will be a review, but we're going to build off of what we learned in that first one. Then we're going to talk about our fueling needs, and especially what this might look like for you as a canoe kayak athlete. Third, we're going to talk about digestion rates, and I'll give you a little bit more information around the different rates of digestion so that you have more of an informed decision when it comes to fueling. And then last, we're going to do an application example to show you how to put this all together. So let's jump right in. So hopefully these pyramids look familiar to you. This is our sport nutrition pyramid. And again, here we want to focus on building up our diet so that the majority of what we're eating is comprised of our whole foods, or balanced diet would be another term we can use here. So whole foods or a balanced diet. We want to make that our foundation instead of some of those sports foods or supplements. So we really want to focus on the pyramid on the right there. This is our main focus, and we want to make sure that we're working our way up that pyramid. So we're going up, starting with that strong balanced diet, that strong whole foods foundation, and then working on our sport nutrition, and then maybe adding in supplements at the end. But we really want to make sure we're focusing on that balanced diet first, because if you compare that to the pyramid on the left, if we don't want to start that pyramid with a weak foundation where it's really small and we're working our way up. And we also don't want to start at the top and work our way down. We want to start in the green there where that balanced diet is our focus, and then working our way up. And today we're going to tie in a bit of the sport nutrition piece here. So we're going to go beyond, what to eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and we're going to add in, what to eat in between, when to eat your meals, and what do you do when you don't have time to eat. So we'll talk about all of that, but I just want you to remember that we're focusing on that right pyramid where we have the balanced diet first and we're working our way up. So what does this mean then in terms of our plate? So as a review, we talked about our balanced meals in the first module, and this plate would represent a light or a tapered training day. And we still want to include a good balance of all of our wholesome foods. So this would include our grains and our starches, our meats and alternatives, and then our vegetables and our fruit. And as we move through and increase our intensity or increase our training, we need to account for the increase in exercise with our carbohydrates. So that would mean as our training days get a little bit heavier, we move into more moderate training, we want to increase the portion of our plate with our grains and starches to about a third. We're still including our protein there, and we want to reduce the vegetables just a little bit to make room for our grains and starches. And then as we move into more of a heavy training day, again, as we increase, we want to account for that with more carbohydrates. So we're going to add a little bit more grains and starches to make about half of our plate, taper back the vegetables a little bit to make room, but we're still including those along with our protein. So as you can see, the grains and starches group gets a little bit larger as our training increases. Vegetables go down a little bit, but they are still there. And then we also always include our protein-rich foods, our meats and alternatives, a quarter of the plate. And of course, you can always eat a little bit more. Some athletes say, I'm still really hungry. And so certainly you can have maybe a second plate or a larger portion. But we definitely don't want to leave out those vegetables. We want to include at least a quarter of a plate there on those heavy training days. And as a reminder too, we want to be thinking about adding in a little bit of those healthy fats into each meal, adding in some flavor, so some spices or herbs, so that it helps increase your enjoyment of those meals. And then last but not least, we always want to include some fluids like water with each of our meals. So now, what does this look like in terms of our training? So tying in now more of the sport nutrition component and not just eating balanced meals. So what does this look like as an athlete, and how do we tie this into our sport and our training, especially as a canoe kayak athlete? So let's go through this example together, and let's say that you have maybe an early morning paddle on the water, and then you also have a lift in the evening after school or work. And let's now talk about what this might look like as an example day, and how to fuel yourself for this type of training day. Using this example, I wanted to talk about a really important piece here around underfueling and over-recovery. So what happens often when we're training a lot is athletes don't adjust their carbohydrate intake to match the level of activity they're doing or the increased energy expenditure, and they can become underfueled. And this means that you don't have enough fuel or energy to match the amount of activity that you're doing. And when someone's underfueled, you typically don't feel very good. And what happens is often an athlete will try to make up for it during the recovery period, which is a good thing. It's great that you're trying to make up for it, but what happens is we end up over refueling, or we have over recovery. And by the end of the day, you may not be able to have enough energy or stamina or fuel to get through that last session, that last strength session in the evening. So what this could look like is, as an example, if we skip breakfast, we don't have anything in our stomach before we hit the water, we do our training session, and then we might have a granola bar afterwards, and then we'll have a sandwich around lunch. We'll go to our S&C session in the afternoon, and then we'll get home, we'll be really hungry, so we'll have a big dinner. And then in the evening, maybe we'll get kind of snacky and have some junk food. And what this might look like in terms of our energy level is something a little bit like this. It's a bit of a roller coaster ride. So this isn't ideal because now our energy levels are kind of all over the place. So they might be really low before our paddle because we don't have anything in our stomach. They might increase quickly with that bit of a granola bar, but not too much, and it won't last very long because that granola bar isn't too substantial. There's really not a lot of carbohydrates in there. Then we'll get another little peak as we eat our sandwich, but that won't last very long, especially going into our strength session. And then we'll get a really big rise in our energy with that big dinner, and then another big rise with the junk food in the evening. And so what we're doing here is we're just playing catch up. We're over recovering after our sessions, and we're not going to get the energy that we need for our training. As you see here, we get most of our bursts of energy after our sessions, after our paddle, after our strength session, when really we want our energy during our paddle, during our strength session. So this is really important to think about. When we underfuel, we often over-recover, and we get into this cycle where we're getting that energy after. We're over-recovering after our sessions when we really want to recover when we need to and fuel beforehand so that we're getting that energy that we need during our session. So how do we avoid this cycle of underfueling and over-recovery? What can we do to help avoid this? Well, we want to take some time to plan our sport nutrition, plan our meals and our snacks so that we've got that solid energy level throughout the day. And using the foundations that we've already learned about, we need to be at minimum eating our 3 balanced meals, our balanced plates throughout the day. But we might need to be adding in maybe 2-3 snacks in between our meals just to keep our energy levels up. And this is, in a perfect world, what we're aiming for, but we all know that this just, some days, most days, it won't happen. Maybe you're having to get out on the water early morning to avoid the heat, and you just can't eat breakfast at 7 a.m. Or maybe you've got a cross-training session in the afternoon around 3 o'clock, and you can't snack at that time. And that's okay. And this is where we tie in that sport nutrition piece, and we learn how to have our balanced meals and our snacks at times throughout the day that are going to work for us and our training schedule. And we're going to talk about the different digestion rates of foods, and I'll show you how to incorporate this into your own training schedule. So let's talk about digestion. And really, food, when we eat food, we chew it, we start to break it down in our mouth, then it moves down to our stomach, and then into our intestines, and it's broken down into smaller molecules of sugar. And this is carried to various organs throughout our body, which is really important for our sport performance. So we've got energy going to our muscles, our lungs, our heart. And it's important to know that different foods will take different lengths of time to go through this process. So we really must consider the different digestion rates of foods when we're thinking about how to make our nutrition plan and our nutrition schedule work with our training. Here are the different digestion rates of our different macronutrients. So at the top there are carbohydrate foods. So think back to what we talked about in the last module. We looked at the different foods that contain carbohydrates. And these foods would take about 2 hours or less to digest in our body. So they are the quickest option. And then moving up from that, well, I suppose down from that, we've got our protein there. That takes a little bit longer. Proteins take about 2 to 5 hours to digest. And then lastly, our fats, they take the longest, around 4 to 9 hours to digest in our body. So a really easy way to help you figure out what you're going to eat when is using the 3-2-1 rule. And all this means is if you have 3 hours, 2 hours, or 1 hour before training, it's a quick rule of thumb to help you remember what kind of foods you can choose, depending on how much time you have before training. So thinking about if we only have 3 hours before our next training session, we want to have a meal that's going to have a combination of protein foods, carbohydrate foods, and a little bit of fat. This food might include a little bit of fiber as well, maybe from some fruit or vegetables or some starchy carbohydrates. But the reason why we want to include the protein carbs with a little bit of fat is because we have 3 hours for these foods to digest. And remember that fat does take the longest, so we want to include just a small portion to make sure that you have enough time to digest that and it doesn't sit too heavy in your stomach. So 3 hours out, it may look like more of our balanced meal. Keep in mind too, if you have more than 3 hours, like let's say you have 4 hours before your next session, you might be able to get away with a larger portion of fat. Now, if you have only about 2 hours before, we'd want to focus on a snack that has mostly carbs, but we can include a little bit of protein here. Remember that protein takes at least 2 hours to digest, so we can include a little bit of it, and it's actually really important too because this is what's going to help make you feel satisfied and not get too hungry before your training session. So we can include a little bit of protein, but our emphasis here is more so on our carbs. So an example of this would be maybe some crackers with a little bit of hummus. And remember too that this doesn't mean that you have to eat at the 3 hour mark, at the 2 hour mark, and at the 1 hour mark. It's more of an and or situation where you can eat at one time or the other, depending on how much time you have left. So you don't have to eat at each of these times. And if you have only 1 hour before your next session, we really want to focus and make our snack purely carbs. And that's because these foods will digest the quickest, so they won't sit too heavy on your stomach. It might be something light that will give you energy before you hit the water. So an example of this would be maybe fruit, applesauce, or maybe a granola bar. with some chocolate chips in it or something like that. And also to keep in mind that every athlete is different, and some may be able to tolerate a larger meal maybe closer to the 2-hour mark, and others may not. So keep in mind your own tolerance and the foods that you like, and maybe experiment with this timing or this 3-2-1 rule during the off season so that you can get to know your body best. So here are some more examples of things that you can have using the 3-2-1 rule before training. So 3 to 4 hours before, these examples reflect more of our mixed balance meals. 2 hours before, we're prioritizing our carbs, but still including some protein. And then 1 hour before, we're really focusing on those carbohydrate-rich foods. And one thing to note as well is that these carbohydrate-rich foods can also be used as energy during exercise. And that's because these are our quick options. So they're going to digest really quickly and give us the energy that we need to get through a longer training session. We don't want to include too much here, but we can include some. We just want to be mindful that we're not having foods that are high in fiber, protein, or fat because we don't have time to digest those while we're exercising. So limiting those and focusing on those carbohydrate-rich foods will be great for that quick energy we need during exercise. All right, so let's put this all together now. So let's use the example that we looked at the beginning of this module where we have 2 training sessions in a day. And here we want to build up our knowledge. So we want to use what we know about the importance of that strong nutrition foundation. So having those balanced meals and balanced snacks throughout the day. And we also want to make sure that these are well spaced, and we want to make sure that they are spaced in a way that they're going to give you the fuel you need to get through your training sessions as well as help you recover. And to tie that all together, we'll now add in the knowledge that we know about our different digestion rates for our foods using that 3-2-1 rule. So starting off with carbohydrates, again, these are going to be important for giving us the fuel that we need going into training. So we might space them out looking something like this. So first of all, we don't want to skip breakfast. We want to make sure that we're having something before we hit the water in the morning. If it is an earlier morning session, then just getting some of those lighter, quicker carbs in would be better than nothing. But we want to make sure we're trying to prioritize getting some carbohydrates in before this session, as well as having some afterwards to recover. We might add in some more carbohydrates in the middle of the day, and then we'd also add some maybe before our next training session to help us get ready for that next training session. And then we'd want to add in some carbs maybe afterwards, and then some later on in the evening. Again, to really help with our recovery and getting us ready for the next day. And then protein. So this is how I would space it out throughout the day. So I'll walk you through it. So we'd want to have a little bit of protein before that first session, but not too much, because remember with protein, it does take about 2 hours to digest. So we'd want to have a really small portion, and we don't want to have too much so that you're having to wake up really early in the morning in order to digest that protein, because sleep is really important, and we want to make sure that we're also prioritizing some good sleep. So we can include something small for breakfast, maybe a small amount of protein so that we do have enough time for it to digest before we hit the water in the morning. And then we'd want to include some more protein afterwards. Again, this is going to help with our muscle recovery. We'd want to include some again later in the afternoon, maybe for lunch. And then as we get closer to our next session, we might want to include just a little beforehand. Nothing during. Again, we don't have any time to digest that protein, but we'd want to include some for recovery for our muscle afterwards. So this is how I would space out our carbs and our protein for this training day. And then I would take it a step further and I'd make these meals our mixed or our balanced meals just to make things a little bit more practical. And I have them spaced out so that we have enough time for those foods to digest before our next training session. So remember that these balanced meals should include some of our protein foods, some foods with some vegetables, maybe some fiber-rich foods, some whole grains, as well as a little bit of fat. And so all of these foods in combination, they're going to take a little bit longer to digest. So we need to make sure that they're placed in a larger gap so we have that time. So this might mean that our main breakfast actually will happen after our paddle in the morning. So this isn't to say that we should skip our breakfast. We definitely should have something beforehand, but we just might eat our larger meal after training and have more of that 1 to 2 hour balanced snack prior to hitting the water. So if we aim for something like this, focusing on some of those smaller balanced snacks before and after our training, and including those snacks right there, that will help to fuel us before our session. And we're also keeping in mind those digestion rates by including just a little bit of protein. And because of this, we are going to get a really nice balanced energy level throughout the day. So the important thing here is because we're including those snacks, the recovery snacks and those balanced meals, and we're timing it in a way that works around our schedule, we are going to get the energy that we need before training, and we're going to get the energy while we're training. We're also going to get those recovery nutrients in after our sessions. And this is the opposite to what we saw earlier. So we're no longer under fueling and over recovering. Instead, we're getting that optimized nutrition for performance. We're planning ahead and we're using our knowledge of those digestion rates to properly time our intake so that we're going into our training sessions well fueled and feeling our best. So to wrap this module up, let's go over some of the key points or the main takeaways. So 1, carbohydrate is our quick fuel. So thinking that when we need a quick energy source, we think of our carbohydrates. Proteins will take a little bit longer to digest. So just thinking ahead a little bit in advance and making sure that we do have a little bit of time to digest foods that contain protein. Now, fat and fiber take even longer to digest. And although fat and fiber foods are quite nutritious for us, remember they make up part of that good sport nutrition foundation, we just need to keep in mind that because they take even longer to digest, we need to space them out a little bit more in advance and outside of our training. And then lastly, again, we need to plan our meals and our snacks, knowing what we know now about digestion rates, using that 3-2-1 rule to help you create an optimal and a balanced nutrition plan. So that is it for this fueling and digestion module. Please see the quiz and the task to follow, and we'll see you in the next one.